Chosen ones, God just did something big for you. It's better than you imagine. When you hear that something big has already been set in motion for you, it does not mean that everything around you will instantly look different. Often, the most powerful shifts begin beneath the surface, in ways that are not immediately visible, but deeply influential. What changes first is not always circumstance, but direction. Momentum. The internal conditions that make future outcomes possible. Sometimes what has already been done is not an event you can point to, but a reordering of timing, opportunity, and readiness that begins to align in your favor. This kind of change does not announce itself loudly. It unfolds through subtle openings, improved clarity, and a growing sense that you are no longer stuck in the same cycles you once were. Stay with this message until the very end, because each layer builds on the one before it, and meaning becomes clearer as you move forward. And write your warmest wishes in the comments and include the number 144 as a conscious expression of intention and focused energy. This moment reflects a chapter where expectation begins to meet preparation, where awareness strengthens belief, and where internal alignment starts influencing external outcomes. This is the only place where wishes are mentioned, because from here on, the focus turns fully toward growth, responsibility, and the unfolding of what has already been set in motion. Now, chosen one, press the hype button like this video, subscribe if you haven't subscribed to the channel, and let's start. When something meaningful shifts in your path, it often shows up first as a change in how you think and respond. You may notice that you are less reactive to problems that once consumed your attention. Situations that used to feel overwhelming now feel manageable. This does not mean difficulty disappears, but your capacity to navigate it improves. Increased capacity is one of the clearest signs that something important has already changed. You may also notice that your patience begins to deepen. You are less rushed by anxiety and less pressured by comparison. You trust that your process is unfolding in its own time. This trust reduces impulsive decisions and supports more thoughtful planning. Another sign is increased clarity about what matters. Distractions lose some of their pull. You become more selective with your time, energy, and attention. This selectivity is not withdrawal, it is focus. Focus allows effort to compound instead of scatter. You may also notice a growing sense of emotional stability. Your moods fluctuate less dramatically. You recover more quickly from disappointment. You experience stress without becoming defined by it. Emotional regulation strengthens decision-making and protects long-term progress. Sometimes what has been done for you is the removal of internal barriers that once kept you cycling through the same patterns. Self-doubt may soften. Fear may become less controlling. You begin to act from intention rather than habit. This shift is quiet but powerful. You may also experience a stronger sense of agency. You no longer feel like life is simply happening to you. You recognize your influence over outcomes through daily choices, routines, and mindset. This agency increases motivation and responsibility at the same time. Another sign is improved self-respect. You honor your commitments more consistently. You protect your energy. You step away from situations that undermine your well-being. These boundaries support stability and future growth. You may also notice that your thinking becomes more solution-oriented. Instead of focusing on what is missing, you look for what can be built. This constructive mindset accelerates problem-solving and innovation. Sometimes, the big thing that has already happened is that you are now prepared to recognize opportunity when it appears. In the past, you may have overlooked openings because you did not feel ready or worthy. Now you are more open to receiving and acting on what aligns. You may also notice that your communication becomes clearer. You express needs more directly. You listen more carefully. This clarity improves relationships and reduces unnecessary conflict. Another sign is increased consistency. You follow through even when motivation dips. You rely on systems and habits rather than waiting to feel inspired. This consistency compounds into measurable progress over time. You may also experience a shift in how you view setbacks. Instead of seeing them as proof that nothing is working, you treat them as feedback. You adjust rather than quit. This resilience keeps momentum moving forward. Sometimes what has already been done is that the right connections, resources, or timing are quietly aligning, even if you cannot yet see the full picture. Progress does not always arrive as a dramatic breakthrough. Often it arrives as a sequence of small, well-timed openings. You may also notice that your sense of self becomes more grounded. You are less influenced by external opinions and more guided by your own values. This internal stability strengthens confidence and decision-making. Another sign is improved tolerance for uncertainty. You do not panic when everything is not yet clear. You trust your ability to navigate as information unfolds. This calm supports strategic thinking. You may also experience increased curiosity and willingness to learn. You invest in skills, understanding, and personal development. This learning mindset prepares you for future responsibilities and opportunities. Sometimes the big shift is that you are no longer being held back by old narratives about who you are or what you deserve. You stop defining yourself by past limitations. You begin identifying with growth, adaptability, and possibility. You may also notice that your goals become more aligned with long-term well-being rather than short-term gratification. You make choices that support stability, health, and sustainable progress. Another sign is increased emotional maturity. You take responsibility for your reactions. You communicate rather than withdraw or explode. This maturity strengthens both personal and professional relationships. You may also experience a change in how you experience hope. Hope becomes calmer and more grounded. It is not based on fantasy, but on evidence of your own growth and improved capacity. Sometimes, what has been done is the clearing of internal resistance that once made success feel unsafe or overwhelming. You become more comfortable with growth, visibility, and responsibility. You may also notice that your focus improves. You are less scattered. You can stay with tasks longer and complete what you start. This focus increases productivity and satisfaction. Another sign is improved planning. You think ahead. You organize steps. You manage resources more intentionally. This structure supports long-term achievement. You may also experience a stronger connection between effort and outcome. You trust that your actions matter. This belief strengthens perseverance. Sometimes the biggest change is not in what you receive, but in what you are ready to sustain. You can now hold more responsibility, opportunity, and success without becoming overwhelmed. You may also notice that your sense of gratitude deepens, not just for what you have, but for what you are becoming. This appreciation supports emotional balance. Another sign is increased willingness to let go of what no longer fits. You release habits, goals, or relationships that belong to an earlier version of you. This release creates space for growth. You may also experience improved adaptability. When plans shift, you adjust rather than collapse. This flexibility supports resilience. Sometimes what has been done is that the right foundation is finally in place. Foundation is not exciting, but it is essential. It allows everything else to stand. As this first part comes to rest, Understand this clearly. The most meaningful changes often begin as shifts in capacity, clarity, and direction. You may not yet see every result, but you can feel that you are no longer where you were. Something has already moved. Something has already aligned. What unfolds next is built on this new internal position, not on the limitations of the past. And that is why what is ahead has the potential to be better than you imagined. Not because everything will be easy, but because you are now prepared to grow into what is coming. As this shift continues to unfold, you may begin to recognize that what is changing is not only how you respond to life, but what you now expect from it. Expectations shape behavior, and behavior shapes outcomes. When you start expecting progress instead of repeating the same struggles, you naturally begin making choices that support forward movement. This is not optimism without action. It is alignment between belief and behavior. You may notice that your confidence becomes less dependent on circumstances. Even when things are uncertain, you still feel grounded in your ability to adapt and respond. This inner steadiness allows you to stay engaged instead of withdrawing when challenges arise. Engagement is what keeps growth active. Another important development is how you handle responsibility for your future. You stop postponing important decisions. You address issues that once felt uncomfortable to confront. This proactive mindset prevents problems from growing larger and gives you greater control over direction. You may also notice that your emotional reactions become more proportional to situations. Instead of extreme responses, you respond with measured perspective. This emotional regulation protects relationships and supports clearer thinking. As capacity grows, your tolerance for inconsistency may decrease. You are less willing to accept chaos in routines, finances, or commitments. You seek order not because you crave control, but because you recognize that stability supports progress. You may also find that your motivation becomes more consistent. You no longer rely on emotional highs to act. You act because it aligns with who you are becoming. This identity-based motivation is far more reliable than temporary inspiration. Another sign of growth is how you interpret feedback. You listen without defensiveness. You evaluate what is useful and apply it. This openness accelerates learning and improves performance. You may also notice that your planning becomes more thoughtful. You consider resources, time, and energy more carefully. This strategic thinking reduces burnout and increases effectiveness. Sometimes what has been done is that your perception of what is possible has expanded. You begin considering paths that once felt unrealistic. This expansion does not mean reckless dreaming. It means allowing yourself to aim higher while still committing to preparation. You may also experience increased patience with yourself. You recognize that growth is not linear. You allow for adjustment periods without self-criticism. This compassion protects resilience. Another shift is how you manage pressure. Instead of letting it create panic, you use it to clarify priorities. You focus on what truly matters and release unnecessary stressors. You may also notice that your boundaries become stronger. You say no to distractions that pull you away from important goals. This selectivity protects focus and energy. As clarity improves, your goals may also become more refined. You move away from vague hopes and toward specific, actionable objectives. This precision increases follow-through. You may also experience increased trust in your own timing. You stop rushing to meet external expectations. You move when readiness and opportunity align. This timing awareness reduces regret. Another sign of alignment is how you handle success. You accept progress without guilt. you allow yourself to acknowledge growth. This acceptance reinforces confidence and motivation. You may also notice that your relationship with rest becomes healthier. You rest intentionally to support productivity, rather than only when exhausted. This balance protects long-term performance. Sometimes what has been done is that your nervous system is no longer in constant survival mode. You feel safer to plan, build, and invest in the future. This sense of safety is essential for sustained growth. You may also experience increased curiosity about improving systems in your life, finances, health, skills, and relationships. This curiosity drives practical improvements. Another development is how you respond to uncertainty. You gather information and adjust rather than freezing or acting impulsively. This balanced response supports better outcomes. You may also notice that your internal narrative becomes more constructive. You focus on learning rather than blaming. This mindset keeps momentum moving forward. As identity stabilizes, your willingness to take responsibility for long-term outcomes increases. You make decisions with future impact in mind. This foresight supports stability. You may also experience improved emotional resilience. You recover more quickly after disappointment. You re-engage instead of retreating. This resilience sustains progress. Another shift is how you relate to opportunity. You recognize that opportunity often requires preparation and effort. You step into it with readiness rather than hesitation. You may also notice that your tolerance for self-sabotage decreases. Patterns that once felt normal now feel misaligned. You interrupt them sooner. This self-awareness protects growth. Sometimes what has been done is that your mindset is no longer anchored to past limitations. You allow yourself to imagine different outcomes and then take steps toward them. You may also experience greater clarity around what you are willing to work for. You commit to goals that matter, rather than chasing everything that looks attractive. This focus strengthens results. Another sign of growth is how you manage emotional investment. You care deeply, but you do not let temporary outcomes define your entire outlook. This balance protects mental health. You may also notice that your capacity for delayed gratification improves. You are willing to wait and work for meaningful rewards. This patience supports long-term success. As this second part settles, understand this. What has already been set in motion is not only a change in circumstance, but a strengthening of your capacity to build and sustain improvement. You are becoming someone who can recognize opportunity, respond with preparation, and remain steady when growth requires effort. This internal shift is what allows external change to take root. What is coming is supported by who you are now, not by who you used to be, and that is why this moment carries more potential than it may currently appear. As this process continues, you may begin to notice that your sense of direction becomes clearer, even if every detail is not yet defined. You may not know exactly how each step will unfold, but you feel more confident about the general path you are on. This confidence is not based on certainty, but on alignment. When your actions, values, and intentions begin to work together, direction becomes easier to trust. You may also notice that your relationship with effort changes. Effort no longer feels like proof that something is wrong. It feels like participation in growth. You accept that meaningful progress requires consistency, learning, and refinement. This acceptance removes much of the emotional resistance that once made effort feel exhausting. Another important shift is how you handle moments when things do not move as quickly as you hoped. Instead of becoming discouraged, you stay engaged. You continue preparing, adjusting, and learning. This persistence during slower phases protects long-term momentum. You may also find that your emotional reactions to uncertainty continue to soften. You tolerate not having all the answers. You trust that clarity will arrive as you remain active and observant. This comfort with not knowing supports adaptability and reduces anxiety. As your internal stability grows, you may notice that your focus improves. You are less scattered by every new idea or distraction. You commit to fewer goals, but you commit more deeply. This depth of focus increases effectiveness and satisfaction. You may also experience increased confidence in making decisions. You do not wait endlessly for perfect information. You evaluate what you have, choose thoughtfully, and adjust when necessary. This decisiveness supports progress and reduces stagnation. Another sign of growth is how you relate to discomfort. You understand that growth often feels unfamiliar before it feels rewarding. You remain present instead of retreating into avoidance. This willingness to stay engaged during discomfort strengthens resilience. You may also notice that your sense of self-respect continues to deepen. You honor your commitments. You protect your time. You stop negotiating with habits that undermine your well-being. This self-respect reinforces confidence and stability. As clarity improves, you may also find that your priorities become more practical. You focus on what builds stability, skill, and meaningful connection rather than chasing every exciting possibility. This practicality supports sustainable growth. You may also experience increased awareness of how your daily routines shape your future. Small habits feel more significant. You recognize that consistency compounds. This awareness encourages more intentional structure. Another shift is how you handle emotional setbacks. You process them without letting them derail your entire outlook. You acknowledge feelings, learn from situations, and continue forward. This emotional flexibility protects momentum. You may also notice that your tolerance for unhealthy environments decreases. You choose spaces that support calm, respect, and focus. This selectivity preserves energy and strengthens performance. As your sense of readiness grows, you may also experience increased willingness to step into roles that require initiative. You stop waiting to be invited. You contribute where you can add value. This proactive engagement opens new opportunities. You may also find that your relationship with learning becomes more active. You seek information, mentorship, and skill development intentionally. This curiosity accelerates competence and confidence. Another important development is how you relate to mistakes. You treat them as feedback rather than identity. You correct course without excessive self-judgment. This mindset supports continuous improvement. You may also notice that your expectations of yourself become clearer. You set standards that are challenging but realistic. This balance prevents both complacency and burnout. As emotional regulation improves, your communication during difficult conversations may also become more constructive. You express concerns calmly. You listen without immediately reacting. This communication strengthens trust and collaboration. You may also experience increased awareness of timing. You recognize when to act and when to wait. You avoid forcing outcomes prematurely. This timing sensitivity protects long-term results. Another shift is how you manage stress. You intervene earlier when pressure builds. You use rest, organization, and boundary setting to maintain balance. This proactive regulation preserves mental clarity. You may also notice that your sense of gratitude becomes more connected to growth than comfort. You appreciate progress, learning, and resilience. This grounded gratitude supports emotional balance. As your identity continues to evolve, you may also feel more comfortable letting go of goals that no longer align with who you are becoming. You release without guilt. This release creates space for better-fitting opportunities. You may also experience increased confidence in your ability to rebuild if needed. You trust your capacity to recover and adapt. This confidence reduces fear of change. Another important development is how you manage expectations in relationships. You communicate needs more clearly. You choose connection based on mutual respect rather than emotional dependency. This maturity strengthens stability. You may also notice that your motivation becomes less reactive and more steady. You act from commitment rather than mood. This consistency supports long-term achievement. As your internal alignment strengthens, you may also experience increased comfort with visibility. You allow your work, ideas, and contributions to be seen without excessive fear of judgment. This openness supports opportunity. You may also find that your attention to detail improves. You care about doing things well, not just finishing quickly. This quality orientation increases the value of what you build. Another shift is how you interpret challenges. Instead of asking why this is happening to you, you ask how this can develop you. This growth-oriented perspective keeps learning active. You may also notice that your patience with complex goals deepens. You accept that meaningful change requires sustained effort. This patience protects perseverance. As readiness continues to grow, you may also experience increased sense of internal calm, even when life is busy. You return to baseline more quickly after stress. This regulation supports health and clarity. Another important development is how you manage responsibility for long-term outcomes. You consider future impact when making decisions. This foresight supports stability. You may also notice that your sense of personal agency strengthens. You see yourself as capable of shaping your direction rather than waiting for circumstances to decide for you. As this third part settles, understand this. What is unfolding is not only an external shift, but a strengthening of your ability to navigate growth with clarity, patience, and responsibility. You are becoming more focused, more resilient, and more intentional in how you move forward. This internal readiness is what allows opportunities to be used wisely rather than wasted. What is ahead is not simply something that happens to you, it is something you are increasingly prepared to participate in, shape, and sustain. As this readiness continues to strengthen, you may begin to notice that your relationship with identity becomes more flexible and more empowered at the same time. You are no longer locked into old definitions of who you are or what you can do. At the same time, you are more grounded in your values and boundaries. This combination of flexibility and stability allows you to grow without losing yourself in the process. You may also notice that your tolerance for emotional drama decreases. Situations that revolve around constant conflict, confusion, or instability no longer feel stimulating or familiar. They feel draining. You are drawn instead to environments that support clarity, cooperation, and forward movement. This shift protects your energy and supports long-term growth. Another important development is how you approach decision-making when stakes are higher. You take time to consider consequences, not because you are fearful, but because you are responsible. You understand that bigger opportunities require thoughtful handling. This maturity increases the likelihood that growth remains sustainable. You may also experience increased confidence in your ability to course-correct. You are no longer afraid of making the wrong decision because you trust yourself to adjust if needed. This confidence reduces paralysis and encourages forward movement. As your internal stability grows, you may notice that your reactions to external stress become more contained. You still feel pressure, but you do not spiral as easily. You stay present, assess options, and respond strategically. This composure improves both performance and well-being. You may also find that your sense of self-worth becomes more independent of productivity. You value contribution, but you do not equate rest with failure. This balanced self-worth protects you from burnout and supports consistency. Another shift is how you handle responsibility toward others. You support and contribute, but you do not take on burdens that are not yours to carry. This boundary awareness prevents emotional exhaustion and preserves clarity. You may also notice that your long-term planning becomes more realistic. You account for energy, learning curves, and unexpected changes. This realism improves execution and reduces frustration. As identity continues to align with growth, your curiosity about improving systems in your life may increase. You refine how you manage time, finances, communication, and recovery. This systems thinking reduces chaos and increases efficiency. You may also experience increased awareness of emotional patterns that once went unnoticed. You recognize triggers, habits, and cycles more quickly. This awareness allows earlier intervention and healthier responses. Another important development is how you relate to uncertainty in relationships and opportunities. You stop rushing to label or control outcomes. You allow situations to develop while staying attentive to red flags and alignment. This balanced approach protects both openness and discernment. You may also notice that your confidence in expressing yourself continues to strengthen. You share ideas, concerns, and boundaries without excessive fear of rejection. This assertiveness supports collaboration and self-respect. As your abundant future begins to feel more tangible, you may also experience increased motivation to protect what you are building. You avoid unnecessary risks that could destabilize progress. This protective instinct supports sustainability. You may also find that your tolerance for inconsistency in yourself decreases. You want your actions to match your intentions. This integrity strengthens trust in yourself and reinforces identity change. Another shift is how you experience ambition. Ambition becomes less about proving something and more about creating stability, impact, and fulfillment. This shift protects motivation from becoming dependent on external validation. You may also notice that your emotional processing becomes more efficient. You feel, reflect, and move forward rather than staying stuck in rumination. This efficiency preserves mental energy and supports focus. As identity evolves, you may also experience increased appreciation for preparation. You take time to build skill and understanding before taking on bigger challenges. This preparation reduces anxiety and increases competence. You may also find that your sense of purpose becomes more connected to daily practice rather than distant goals. You focus on showing up consistently rather than waiting for perfect opportunities. This consistency builds momentum. Another important development is how you manage disappointment. You accept it without letting it distort your overall outlook. You adjust expectations and continue forward. This resilience protects long-term engagement. You may also notice that your emotional investment becomes more balanced. You care deeply, but you are not consumed by every outcome. This balance supports both passion and stability. As your identity stabilizes, your willingness to take responsibility for long-term consequences increases. You think beyond immediate results and consider future impact. This foresight supports wiser decisions.